Okay, so it's December 1st, 2015, and we're here with, it's Judy Ridner and it's Nick Timmerman, and we're here interviewing Carmen Haynes,
Haynes.
sorry, Pam Hunt, Rosemary Cuicchi. Okay, and we are going to be talking with them about their experiences regarding school integration, desegregation in Starkville in the 60s and the 70s. So how about if we start with Rosemary, since you have to leave early. So as I said to you all,
Pam was the one that had
Pam.
oh Pam, I'm sorry, I'm getting sorry.
Start with Pam.
You had pointed that way and I saw Rosemary. Pam, as I said to all of you, typically we start with just some biographical information. So can you tell us about when you were born and where you were born, and just a little bit about your family background?
All right, I was born in 1945 in Altus, Oklahoma. My mother was from Oklahoma and my dad was from Cary, Mississippi in the Delta. And I went to Mississippi State when they were losing in football, which seems very, Bulldogs, we're stubborn and we hang on even though we don't win. I majored in Ed Psych with a minor in social studies education, and so I married Gaddis Hunt of the Gaddis Hunt Commons, I guess, out of state. He wasn't then, but anyway, we have never lived anywhere else. We've always lived in Starkville.
did your student teaching with us.
I did. I did the student teaching in the Greensboro Center, which was at that time the junior high. The junior high. And my first teaching experience was at the junior high, and I had a study hall over at the high school, the last period study hall. And I have taught for, I retired in '99, and all my experience has been in Starkville. Either 8th grade U.S. history, or 9th grade Mississippi history and state government, or later years U.S. history, advanced history, advanced placement American history, and advanced world geography. And then when I retired, I went to Mississippi State Curriculum and Instruction Department, and I was the person responsible for the social studies part of secondary education. And prior to that time, the reason they knew about me is I had been teaching the practicum experience for social studies students at Mississippi State, where we had them go into classrooms 30 hours a semester and kind of see ahead of time what education was all about and whether they still wanted to do it. I had in that study hall, going back to the first year, going back to that, in that study hall I had what was referred to as the token integration. I had, I think, 6 to 8, I'm not sure of the number, African American students. There were a couple of Evans girls in there. There was Thomas Hogan, and I don't remember the names of the rest of them. But the incident that I remember from that is everything was fine. They sat together. This was in a huge room, and white kids sat together. And then one day there was a transfer student from somewhere else, out of Starkville. Who knows where he came from? And he said something, got involved in a fight with, or wanted to start a fight with one of the black students. And I remember, here I am, a young girl in the 20s, and what am I going to do with these high school guys that are going to get in a fight here before I can separate it? I don't want them fighting for obvious reasons. It would make them paper the next day. So one of the white boys separated them and broke up the fight. And of course, course, I think we kicked the guy that started the fight out. I think we kicked him out of school, I would hope so. But anyway, that was the first situation dealing with African Americans. Well, actually it's not, because I was an RA back in Cresswell. In those days, that you didn't have to have any training
At Mississippi State.
at Mississippi State. You didn't have to have any training, you just needed a job, you know, a part-time student job was an RA, and I was one in Cresswell. And my floor had 3 African-American students. They were older students, and they were all in one room on that floor. Nothing ever happened, no problems. I mean, they
What
went
year
to
was
school.
that?
Yeah, well, I'm just,
That must have been 60, well, it was,
Before 1970.
yeah, before 70.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
it must have
Before
been
she
60, I graduated in 67, so it must have been 65, 66.
probably 66.
Good grief.
I have no idea what their names were, I never knew
Yeah.
that.
It was probably, because Richard Holmes, he enrolled in the summer of 65.
Okay,
So it was
that
probably
would have been
66.
65.
Yeah, yeah.
probably.
65 or
Yeah.
60, right, could have been fall of 65.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, and they kept to themselves, and there was no incident, no problem, no demonstration, no anything.
Uh-huh.
It was just people going to school,
Uh-huh.
girls going to school.
Now, what year did you start teaching in Starkville? That would have been 60.
It
Eight?
was, they called, we were on vacation, and they called, and they needed a part-time teacher just for some classes, like that study hall, and a couple of classes at the junior high.
Okay.
And so that would have been in 68, right in through there. And then the next year I taught full-time. And then in 70, I was teaching full-time at the junior high.
Okay, and just help me remember and help all of us remember about the schools. By the new Starkville High, that was built earlier in the 60s, right? And so Greensboro had been the high school, and then it became the middle school. Is that
Junior high.
Junior high.
the junior high? Excuse me.
Yeah,
Okay.
it became the junior high.
Okay.
But New Armstrong was not built until in the 70s,
Okay.
well after
Okay.
integration.
Okay. So, but New Armstrong is not the same as Starkville High, right?
No.
The Greensboro Center was Starkville High.
That's what. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I think that's what Caddy Taylor had told me. And,
And when we
Yes.
integrated the faculty, we were all at Greensboro.
okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Again, it's just trying to
Okay.
get the progression right.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was at the high school.
Well, I was, Pam, were you
I
not
was
at the
at
Green?
Greensboro
You
Center.
were.
Yeah, I was
at
too.
the high school.
Okay, you were at the high school.
Yeah.
That's interesting, so it's like
Yeah.
where they took us from.
Right. I think it was a puzzle. They had to take people they could take because they weren't, we're jumping ahead, but they weren't going to take like a head coach. They weren't going to take a guidance counselor who's working with seniors to get them graduated. They weren't going to take the band director. They weren't going to take, and they had a list that might be in the school board notes.
Yeah.
But they could take a beginning teacher who taught Mississippi history and state government
A
and
real
move her,
beginning
you know.
Right,
teacher.
right,
They
right,
could
and that
take
makes sense, right, because
Yeah.
you really had just started.
I'm
Right.
sure I was on
right.
the bottom of the list because I
Right.
just started in January of '71.
Okay, oh, yeah, all right, so how about if we go then to you,
Okay.
Rosemary, and talk a little bit about like,
Okay.
when you were born and where you're from and how you got to Starkville.
Okay, I was born in 1947 in Montgomery, Alabama. And my parents, well, my daddy's from Ironwood, Michigan, but my mother's from Starkville, Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
And she went to high school at the Greensboro Center now. And I married my husband in 1969, went to Mississippi State from Oak Ridge. Married him in '69, and I started teaching at the high school. And I taught math, and I had a last period study hall. So I was glad to go.
To Henderson.
You got it. But going back to where I grew up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And the schools there were already integrated.
In the early in the 60s, it
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like.
I graduated in '69, so
Okay.
yeah, they were already integrated.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any problems in Oak Ridge that I knew of. Okay. And then I went to state, got my bachelor's and then a master's in math. And I taught math and computer science and diversified technology. And what else? Geometry.
Oh.
At the high school, and I got board certified in like 1998, I believe, and was asked to go up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to help them work on the math for the board certification. So I did that, and I taught at Armstrong Middle School, where I also did my student teaching.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
Under whom?
Mrs. Davis.
Oh,
Do you remember
cool,
her?
yeah.
Okay, she was old then.
Uh-huh.
And I taught at the high school, and I taught at Millsaps Vocational Center.
And now, what year did you start teaching in the
And-
Starkville Public School?
January of '71.
Okay.
And the reason I did that is because I co-opted with NASA in Huntsville, so it put me back a semester of graduating.
Then
So did you?
why would you go with the faculty in 70 if you didn't start teaching until 71?
It was 70, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
70. I was supposed to graduate in '69,
Okay.
regular, but a co-op, so it was December of 70.
Yeah, okay.
And said 69. So in January of 70, no, it was January of 71. That was the school year, 70, 71.
Okay.
It was 71 when I started teaching.
So you started mid.
Rosemary? Mm-mm.
Not,
We went in February of 1970, so you would have had to have been.
yes, I started in 70.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
I should
And
be,
these
then I'm
Went in
sorry.
70.
I got that wrong then, okay.
Okay.
I started in January of 70.
All right.
So you
know the
had
hard
to move
medicine.
over, right?
Yeah, so then you literally started as this was really all coming
Yeah.
Happening,
Mhm.
right.
Alright, as a young
And,
teacher. So now if I just can ask as a side note,
Mhm.
what's the thing with the study halls? So obviously you don't want to teach
Oh,
the
that's a
study
great
halls.
study
Is that what
hall.
this
Well,
is?
I was a brand new teacher.
Okay.
Brand new teacher. Study hall is not good last period.
Try it sometime.
Especially on brand new teachers.
That's why I teach
We
college.
don't even have study hall anymore.
Alright, okay. And so then how about Carmen?
Well, I was born in Ecru, Mississippi, in Pontotoc County in 1933. I'm 82 years old. And there were only about 600 people in the town of Ecru. We had a good school, but we had no library. I can remember reading the encyclopedias. I was so desperate for something to read. I remember reading a book, Apartment for Peggy, and it was about apartments in Russia, over and over, because I didn't have anything to read. So I was just desperate for that. And I went to the W for 2 years, hated every minute of it. Had a few good teachers, but I didn't want to be there. And then got married and in 1953. And then when my husband got out of the Air Force, we both came back to Mississippi State. Well, I thought, yeah, it was wonderful. Mississippi State was, compared to the W, it was just one of those things I didn't like all those girls. And when I got in these classes where I was the only girl at Mississippi State, it was wonderful.
Right.
Plus I had some fabulous teachers. And I double majored in history and English, and I had enough journalism courses to be, they jerked me up and put me on the annual staff as soon as they saw I had all these courses. And I had worked, when my husband was in the Air Force, I had worked as a reporter for the Montgomery Advertiser-Journal. Was working there on the paper when they had the bus boycott, so I was right in the middle of all that, being on a newspaper, and that was very exciting. Then I came back to Mississippi State. My husband got his master's, and I went ahead and finished, and we moved into the Jackson area. I taught at Pelahatchie Attendance Center, a little bitty place Then I thought I was gonna quit because I didn't like that. But then I got a job at Central High School. At the time in Jackson, it was the largest high school in the state. Well, that's where I learned to teach. And then from there, I went to, I taught at Seminary, Collins, and then back here. While I was in Jackson, I was there when they integrated the 5 and dime, you know, the counter, the lunch counter. I was all involved in that. And I remember my class going and watching Ross Barnett's parade, and they had spelled committee wrong, and it was on national television, and all the teachers were going, "Oh, that's going to be on national television coming from Mississippi." The same person had made all the signs, and she'd misspelled every one of them. So then I came here and integrated, you know, when I got here. I came here in 1968.
Okay.
And I had a double major, so I taught some English and some history.
Okay.
I didn't settle into the history that I really liked, which was 7th grade world culture, until one of the teachers retired and I asked for her place. So I taught a lot of everything. I taught every grade from 7 through 12 somewhere in my career, and finally settled in on the 7th grade world culture, which was, you know, wonderful, wonderful course to teach. And then as I said, I don't know how they figured out to do the bingo ball thing, but I remember a board member called me. I remember my number was 8, and he called me and said I had been picked to go. And I wasn't upset, but all my teacher friends were. They were all very upset and cried and all that. But I looked on it as an adventure. And when I got there, of course, I just adored the kids. It was a wonderful experience with the kids, but the outsiders, that's what really did us in.
And so when you say, just to clarify, when you say about the bingo ball, so this would have been probably in the 69,
No.
70, 71 school year.
Yes.
Okay, and this is where they were
Well, it was
determining.
69, 70 school year.
Yeah, 69, 70 school year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because
and
we were
then-
going
Because I
second
just started in
semester.
70.
Okay.
February is when we
Okay,
went.
okay, so February of 70. So then this is to determine who would go over to like Henderson and all of
That's
the
right, that's
segregated,
right.
the black schools.
And I was teaching 7th grade, but they put me in 10th grade world history. I don't know how they did that, why they did that, I never questioned.
Yeah.
We just went.
And you were just told where you were going.
That's right.
You were not.
That's right.
There was no,
It
they
was
didn't
like a-
ask a preference.
No, no.
No.
They called, and Nolan Vickers called me.
And
told
Red
me.
Hill called me.
Right. And they did try to prepare us for the transition in that they suggested some things we not talk about or do talk about. I know one in particular was they stressed, be very, very careful how you say the word Negro. And over and over they said, be sure you say Negro and say it slowly and pronounce it that way because they will hear something else.
Yeah.
And I had never said that other word and still don't say that other word. But they wanted that, and so then they also said you could refer to blacks, and that was acceptable then. It wasn't African American yet. It wasn't that. That's later on. But blacks or Negro.
And we had a little trouble understanding some of their conversation. They would use the word he meddling me. We didn't know what that was. It took me forever.
Well, you know, this must have happened in the fall of 69, because I didn't have all that. Nobody ever told me, I didn't get a phone
There was
call or
one
anything.
meeting, just one
It
meeting.
must have been in the fall, because I didn't start teaching till the
Yeah,
Brunswick.
well, maybe the
I
minutes
never
would
heard
tell
any
something
of
like
that.
that, what they were planning, because they knew they were going to do it. We must have been under court order, and the board was trying to work what we were going to do and how we were going to do it.
The oldest
With the
lady was
details.
Martha Overcash, and she even had to go back and forth
She and Early Fleming had to swap every period.
every day.
Yeah,
Back and
early
forth,
is
and they
talking
didn't
about
even give her any money for,
Crazy.
for gas.
Yeah.
She commented about
Yeah.
that, and she never complained.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
yeah.
She didn't.
And I've heard too from Caddy Taylor that was probably at the start of that school year that there was a big meeting with the school superintendent, Paul Johnson, I think his name is. I may misremember that. He brought all the teachers together in the cafeteria, and she said that he went around the room and named everybody's names. Do you remember that meeting?
I didn't teach under Paul Johnson.
I didn't either.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
So that was an earlier,
It was Jack
He
Hicks
was-
when we were there.
Okay.
Jack
Okay.
Hicks.
yeah,
Well, no, he was the principal of the high
right,
school.
Hal Buchanan.
Hal Buchanan. that's
Hal
right.
Buchanan was
Told
the
me that.
superintendent
Yeah.
in 69,
He was the
70.
superintendent.
Okay.
And
we-
then Paul Armstrong came along,
Yeah.
and he's the one that called the FBI in for me. Everything went smoothly with Mr. Peters was wonderful, Dr. Peters.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
now, where
Yes.
was Dr. Peters? He was at Henderson.
Yes,
He was principal at
he was our
Henderson.
principal.
Okay. And so did all of you then went to Henderson?
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Overcash, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we all taught in this little white
White building.
building. And we were very enthusiastic about going in, but the facilities were just pitiful. So we went out and bought contact paper and garbage cans and that kind of thing to have a room, and it was Black History Month. And I went out and bought a whole lot of books and learned. Those kids thought, Miss Haynes, how did you know all this? I said, I read it out of a book, just like you all would have to. But that hit the spot, starting off with the Black History and using the Black History bulletin boards. But then at night, people would break in and pull all the contact paper off the desk and take the garbage can and tear up your bulletin board, and Mr. Peters would put padlocks on there, and it didn't do any good. They just beat it in. So we started taking everything home. We had to take our crayons and our erasers and our garbage cans, everything that was not tacked down, we took home at night. Now, y'all didn't do that, did you?
Mm-mm.
See, I did. I don't know why they got after me. You know, I had the biggest room there, but they got everything in my, and so the kids were fine. It was just these outsiders.
When you say outsiders, do you have any sense of who was breaking in and why they were breaking in? Did you have any sense of
There were a lot of people not from Starkville that were sent down here for the purpose of messing. They didn't want, and then they were black, they didn't want integration. One particular chapel program, I don't know what we called it back then, but it was, you know what I'm talking about. And there was this guy, Mr. Peters had to be out. And so, of course, everything was very quiet, huge, everybody in the gym. And he stood up and told the kids, do not do what any white teacher asks you to do. Now, this was a black man. And if she says open your book, you don't open the book. So and of course it confused the kids just so bad. I slipped out and called central office and told them what was happening. But nobody could get there until he left. I want to say he was from Ole Miss, but I don't know. Somebody may have just said that. But it was a black guy.
I don't remember
You don't remember that?
No,
Oh,
I
I
didn't have any
do.
problem. They wanted to work. Now the room was, I had no drawers in my desk. The blackboards were so pitted, and I was teaching math that I had to draw big circles and color them in for decimal points. 'Cause
Oh,
it
my
was so
goodness.
pitted.
But you all don't remember that chapel program where, well, I do, so it happened. But the kids, when we got back to the room, most of them none of them wanted to do what he said. And most of them didn't when I said, open your book to page so-and-so. A few didn't open their book, but by the next day, they were fine. And I don't know what they finally did about that, but they followed through on that. And it wouldn't have happened if Dr. Peters had been there. He just happened to be out that day.
And you saw this guy as kind of an outside. He
Oh,
was an
yeah.
outsider.
Oh, yeah,
and,
sent in
and
to
it was
just-
all. And he was African American, and he was trying to teach people to resist.
That's
the
right.
integration.
That's exactly right. That's the only trouble we ever had, because we got along beautifully. I
We
never,
did. The
I
kids
never,
were wonderful.
nobody ever talked back to me.
Better than my last periods to go.
The kids were really, they had it difficult because they had a teacher they liked for a year. Like, I replaced Ray Self, Coach Ray Self, very popular teacher the whole time. And here I am coming in, taking his place, and they are 8th graders. And so they are having to get used to a different way, a different style, a different person
Yes.
when they had grown close to Coach Self.
Yeah.
And they also had, I guess, a right to resent what happened when we came in, because we went over to see the classrooms we were going to teach in, and there were open gas heaters, open space heaters, no grill on front. There was a light bulb that came down on a string in the classroom. And my family said, you know, this just isn't going to work. And they went to the board and took the board members over there. I don't know if they had ever been in the Rosenwald building or not.
Oh, I didn't even know that's what it was called.
Yeah,
that's
that's what it was
Oh,
called. And so we just knew it as the white building.
the white building.
And so the board members went over there and saw the conditions. And when we started teaching, they had fluorescent lights in there. They had grills on the front of the heaters. They couldn't do anything about the floor. The floor was a hardwood floor, but after all the years the building had been used, it was pitted. The grooves were pitted, and so you couldn't move a desk over. And they didn't vacuum. They swept, and so however many years that building was in existence, the dust was there somewhere in the room. And so to see all these changes happening because somebody new is coming in can fill the students with resentment to begin with. But then I think all of us who went over there worked through that, and they saw that we were not there to do them harm,
No.
but to help.
I made
them, to
lasting
teach them.
friends
Yeah.
among those
Oh,
kids.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them that made C's because they just, were told read in the book and answer the questions at the end. When I really started teaching and pulling in all these interesting things, they popped up to A's, and that was wonderful. I mean, I really had kids that improved their grades tremendously, but I really worked at it. But then, now we had to go to on duty. And the three of us, I don't remember Martha being there. She may have been.
She probably was, at the end of the
At the-
day, she was probably at the
Somewhere
hospital.
else,
Never
right.
mind.
We were out on duty, and a car pulled up, and they went to the trunk of the car. Was it all black in the car?
It was a truck, wasn't it?
Well, I don't
No,
know.
it was
no,
like
they
a
opened up
green
the
Monte Carlo
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
car.
They opened
Yeah.
up trunk and
Yeah.
pulled out guns and shot down through the woods and hit a man parked
That's what
at the
this is.
Derby
Right.
restaurant down there, a white man, and they hit him, but it didn't kill him.
No, grazed him.
Grazed
Prior
him.
to that, the reason we were out is there was a march planned. The kids had left the school. They were going to march that particular day, that Monday. And they had just left the school, walked out. We couldn't keep them in. They walked out, and they were planning to march. And so that was what that was all about. We were on the front porch because we didn't have any kids.
Kids,
We didn't have any kids
But
in our classroom.
we witnessed the
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah, we saw the car, and it was pulled up in front of the white building. And the men that were there were not students. They were not students. But they had lifted the trunk of the car, and they had pulled out rifles with scopes on them. And we had heard noises, but we didn't know. In the paper it talks about firecrackers and different things going off. And we didn't know what it was. And then we told Dr. Peters and that was happening there, that had happened. And so then the next day, Carmen can tell you what happened the next day when the kids did come back to school, and that the seniors, the older students were coming around saying, "You better not tell what you saw."
You're marked for
We'll
death.
get you.
One of the boys said, "You're marked for death." Broke in my room, just opened up the door.
Now, we look old and confident now, which we are, but we were young
We were
teachers
young.
then.
I was scared. I cried. I
Yeah.
cried. And my husband had seen a group of black men go in the old Gibson on 182 and buy a lot of paint thinner. Well, you build bombs with paint thinners, I found out later. And he came home and about had a fit. He said, "I'm taking you home, to your home." He said, the children, our boys, their bedroom was on the front. And we already had them in sleeping bags, sleeping in our bedroom, which was on the back. And my husband put a loaded pistol under the pillow. So that's the way we were already living. Hadn't been threatened, but we were nervous, you know. So my husband, when that happened, he took me home for 2 or 3 days. And it was so funny. We came in the middle of the night, and my mother did not see my husband getting stuff out. And she thought I had left my husband. And she saw me and the kids. She said, "Oh, you haven't left Bo, have you?" You know, I said, "No, Mother. Get Daddy up and let me tell you what has happened." And I stayed at home 2 or 3 days. I just called, and they, by that time I was already at central office. But when they broke in our room and said, "You're marked for death," of course we had to turn that in. And the FBI came in on it then. And I had did y'all have a student teacher?
I didn't.
I didn't.
I had a Jewish black belt guy. Smart as a whip, delightful. The kids loved him. And I said, you know, if I got to go, I'll provide you with all you need, and you just keep teaching just like you were. And I came in at the very end of the year and helped him give the exams. But we were pulled out and taken to central office and given little piddling duties there. You know. Xerox, and then, well, you know, it was so sad. But that's the only time I cried through this whole thing. When I didn't want to go, but I was scared. You know, I was scared.
Now,
I was scared too. I was.
Yeah.
how do
We
you
were in
justify?
fear.
Oh, I have no
yeah,
doubt. I have
yeah.
no doubt.
I mean, we moved to my in-laws,
Yeah.
which were on the other side of campus, and stayed.
I remember that.
Well, we
Yeah,
were
because-
dorm parents
yeah.
out at Duggar Dorm. I think it was Duggar Dorm. So I felt pretty safe there.
Out there, yeah.
Now, can you just give me a sense of how many teachers were there at Henderson High, and how many of you were white teachers that had been moved over there? Can you just give me a sense of like,
4 in the high school.
That's
But
it.
There were some that were already there.
okay,
Right.
Who
Right.
all did we say?
Miss Ray was over there.
Okay.
And there was a white math teacher
Okay.
that was in our building, I think.
so there were a couple already
A couple,
there.
yes.
But I know it
But
was
they
a
were not in the
small high
white
school.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
They
over
were
in the major building.
Okay,
Right,
okay.
Right, we had nothing
And
to
so-
do with them at all.
By this point, what was actually in the white building? Was it just
Just
some
it
grades?
was just 4 classrooms, 4 or
Okay.
5 classrooms.
Well, the
Yeah,
art,
and the study
that
hall
was
was in the middle.
Yeah.
And it
And
just
the
so
art
happened
teacher.
that you ended up in the white building.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
they
because
just put
that's
us
where Coach Self taught.
Mhm.
He taught in that
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay, so whoever she replaced taught in that
Yeah,
building. So
Mhm.
we took their
Okay,
place
gotcha.
in the white building. So they had been teaching under those conditions.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
nothing had been done about it.
I understand.
Now, we were still under court order, so that's why the FBI was involved, and that's why we were brought into central office.
Mhm.
We had to testify in front of a federal,
Oh,
what would you
tough.
call him? Federal
Oh,
marshal.
no, I guess I just blocked all that out because I did not
Yeah.
remember at
yeah,
all.
we did,
It was-
Rosemary, yeah.
It was such a
Wow.
scary thing that we had
Wow.
blocked out a whole bunch of this, and it's, you know, it's sitting here,
Yeah.
you can pull things back.
Yeah.
But I didn't even tell my kids about this later, when they were old enough to hear. This was just that kind of thing.
And did they pull
Right.
all of the white teachers out of Henderson at that point, or
Just the
just
ones
us.
that had
Just
been
four
threatened.
of us, just the
Yeah.
four.
who were in the white building?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't
And
know.
we were assigned, they didn't just set us free. I mean, they
No.
didn't just
No,
say, you
we
can go
Had to
home.
work.
We went to central office and we made out courses of study for the courses that we taught, for all of the courses, like all the social studies that would have been taught in the high school. We made a course of study for each one because there had not been one. And they knew that the next year integration was going to occur and we would have to do the same thing. In U.S. history, if you had 4 teachers teaching U.S. history, you needed to do the same kind of
That's
thing.
right, that's right.
And so that's what we did. We ran them off. We worked for Mrs. Buchanan, who was working at central office is where the superintendent was.
Yeah.
It's where the JROTC
Yes, right now.
is at the
That
high
little bitty
school.
building.
Okay.
That was central office at that time.
It
So
was
It
that's
was
very,
crowded.
very
By the time
crowded
we
in there.
moved in there, it was
Very,
crowded,
very
wasn't it?
crowded.
and we ran on the mimeograph.
Bookkeeper,
machine.
everybody was there. That was
We
the
ran
central
that.
office.
Yeah.
And my students would write me notes. They, they wanted me back. They would write notes and say, "Oh, we miss you so much." But I was so glad that I had this student teacher. Now, who took your places?
I have no
I have
idea.
no idea.
I have
Just
no
a
idea.
substitute then.
And how long? So this. Do you remember about what month this incident happened?
At the end of school.
May 5th.
Okay.
Well,
so it's
May
right at the
4th, probably. May 4th, because this was printed the next day.
end. Okay.
So it's May 4th.
So it's right at the end of the
Right
school
at the
year.
end.
It talks about this, when you take a picture on the back side, it talks about a teacher at Henderson High. And that's not any of us, because she was saying about why the students were not in the classroom and things like that. So you can find out from that article about that.
Do you have any sense of how you who these people were who fired the guns? Do you have any sense of who they were?
Older people, they weren't students. They weren't high school students. They were
And
adults.
were
I
they
can't remember, were they
locals? Do you
black
think
or
that they were
white?
They were
locals?
black.
They were black,
Black.
okay.
Mhm.
And do you think they were local people?
I don't think so. You
No
do.
idea.
You do.
And and this was clearly all part of the march that was taking place about not closing Henderson, which is kind of where we started this project with, like, Chris Taylor. He was one of the people who marched in that march. And they went up Main Street and up the hill to Main
Do
Street.
you think the shooting was part of had to
I
do with the
don't
march?
know.
I don't think it was.
I don't think it was part of the
I
march.
don't
I
think
think
it
it
was
was
at
just
all.
part of the setting,
Mhm.
the whole thing going on
I
now.
think it
We
was
don't
just
know
Somebody
why.
mad at somebody.
Yeah, this particular guy,
Mhm.
the Derby was a big place to eat then. There were like 3 places in town to eat. The Derby was one of them. And it was just down the hill. If you drive over there, you can see the green building, although it wasn't green then.
And you just go up that hill and that white building was right
It's
there.
right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, my husband took the family and we went straight to Destin. And while I was there, they called and said the white building has been burned. So we never knew who did that either, did we?
Now, do y'all remember the bomb threat?
Yeah,
Okay,
Being
I
outside
remember
on
a
the bomb threat,
that we
yeah.
all went outside.
that's when the
And
parents.
that made me real nervous because I thought if they're gonna blow something up out here, it's gonna be this little white building.
Yeah, black parents would call me at home and say, "Please take care of watch over my baby." It almost makes me cry to remember that. You know, they were so scared too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they had this view that some,
Oh, yeah.
everyone seemed, that white building was kind of like
Yeah,
ground zero,
yeah,
it sounds
yeah,
like, for a
yeah.
lot of tension.
That's right.
And so there was a fear that this building somehow would get attacked.
Represented something.
Well,
That they didn't like.
the brick building, they didn't want to blow that up.
No, they didn't.
That represented a lot, the Henderson building, so you wouldn't want to blow that up. But you might want to get rid of that white building, because it was in
It
such
was old, it was
pitiful.
wooden, it was
It was
very
pitiful.
old.
Yeah.
And
We have pictures of it. There's a
Oh,
picture
really?
on the
Right,
website.
right.
Well, we're gonna get a copy of the
Yeah.
picture. It's at
Okay.
Fisk University has a
And
copy.
my door had been
The picture. And
beaten
you'll have to,
in
there's
several
another
times,
picture
you know,
that's
so-
from MDAH that we've had some trouble identifying some, we may need to ask you some advice about, we have trouble identifying some of these buildings where there are buildings labeled as Negro School in Starkville, but we don't know which one this was and where it was.
We
So
never went to the cafeteria. I thought that was interesting.
We
I don't know
Because we just
why.
brought our lunch.
We brought our lunch.
It was at the Rosa Stewart building.
Okay, and we just didn't go over
It was
there.
up the hill, you had to
Yeah.
walk
And
to
the
that.
kids, as
It
I
wasn't-
told you, would jump up and look through the transom because they'd never seen white people eat, you know, before. You know, they wanted to see what the teachers looked like. It really was a new world for them.
yeah.
And to show you how it continued and how the kids had to be trained. The next year when we integrated everything, one of the history teachers in the 6th grade, Carol Washington, had a beautiful voice and played the piano beautifully. So Carol and I was 7th grade history and he was 6th grade. We got together and we said, let's do something integrated for a chapel program. So he can't remember what the name of the song was, and I can't either. But we hid at recess and practiced, and we learned a song. He can't even remember either. And we got up, we on stage, I don't know what else went on, but Carol and I, he was going to play, and we were going to sing a duet. Well, there were all these, this was in the Greensboro Center, then in the auditorium, all these kids, it was full. And we opened our mouths to sing. And Carol and I both said it was good. It wasn't just something awful. It was good. Because he could really sing. And the kids, they burst into laughter. They just roared. You know, when we started, they had never seen a black man and a white woman on stage together, let alone singing. And I can still see Martha Overcash going, shh, 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 shh. They were trying to get the kids, but they laughed. We sang, but they didn't hear a thing. They just laughed and laughed and laughed. That's one of the fun things that when we all get together, we talk about that time when Carol and I sang. So we tried to entertain.
So now about how big were your classes that you taught when you were at Henderson? About how many students?
I
Less
don't
than
even
20?
remember.
Would you say less than 20?
No, I think they were about the same
I
size.
think so, I think they're
Yeah.
about the same
But
size.
what is the size? Is it less than 20? I would think less.
No,
20,
back
20 to
then,
25.
Oh, okay.
At least.
Okay.
I'd say about 30.
We had
Was it
no
30?
discipline
Yeah.
problems though.
Yeah.
None. Nobody talked or hit somebody or.
I guess they were afraid we were going to eat them or something.
And when we went the next year, I don't know what they did for these two, but that was back when we had leveled classes. Level 1 were the smart kids, level 2 medium, and level 3 were the worst. And they gave me all level 1s. I had all these smart kids. So I had a wonderful year, the second year, because, when I went back to my class, because they rewarded me by giving me
Well, now, I
all.
taught 9th grade math, so I was over at Henderson teaching math.
You stayed at Henderson?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that,
Mhm.
Rosemary.
Yeah.
Bless
And I
your
was
heart.
at 8th grade teaching U.S. history in the Rosa Stewart
In the
building.
Rosa Stewart building,
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah, in the second year,
Mhm.
I went
you
back
went to a
to my
different
room.
building. You went to a different. And
Well,
you
I went,
back.
I went to
You
the,
just went to the
brick.
main building, the brick
Mhm, the
building.
main building. Mhm.
Gotcha.
If you look at the two buildings, they must have been built about the same time. the separate but equal concept, because Henderson looks a lot like the high school before all the renovations everywhere. But they looked a lot alike, that same long with windows and everything.
Brick,
So,
same color brick.
yeah,
Yeah.
same color.
And the Rosenwald School dates to, I think it's right around 1910,
I don't know.
1920. It's
Rose is
early.
old.
No, the
Rose
white
is-
building.
Oh, the
white
white
building.
building, probably, yeah.
It's
Oh,
pretty
it was
early.
bad.
Right.
So early 20th century.
BC.
Yeah.
It was old.
I wish I had made a picture though, and my husband tried so hard to get me to
It
take.
did have a
note-
porch
to-
though.
Yeah, it did, sure did. To get me to take notes, write a diary,
Yeah.
and I should have, because so many funny things happened. We just laughed a lot,
We did.
and people would be
It was
really
a pleasant
surprised to
experience.
know
It was a pleasant
that
experience.
with our kids, it was a pleasant experience.
And so at this point though, when you're talking about, what's interesting is that when you're talking about integration, it's they sent white teachers into the black school. Your classes were not yet in, they
No,
were not
I
white
taught
students.
all black,
Okay,
all
that's
black.
what I thought, okay.
And the black teachers went
Went
to
to
the
white
white,
school.
Taught
and
all,
they,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
Ray Self is no longer, he's
Yeah.
passed away.
But he was at Starkville High.
He was at
Yeah,
Starkville High.
because I've seen photos of him.
Yeah, and then he stayed. Some of the teachers were not rehired for the next school year, but he was, and was a football coach as well. And he taught U.S. government there.
Now,
I
when
have
did
to
they?
say, my husband was in the service. Well, he graduated ROTC, and we moved to Augusta, Georgia, and I taught over there, and they integrated the same way. They sent teachers to the black schools.
And then when did they mix up all the students? Because at
Wow,
least
I
by
don't know.
The next
Fall,
Yeah, it was the next
in
year.
the
The
fall
next
of
year, yeah.
70, yeah, in the
Okay.
fall of 70.
Gotcha.
And it all worked really smoothly. I mean,
It did, it
my
really
boys, they really enjoyed the black friends because they were tough, you know, and played football and,
Yeah,
and things were better then
yeah.
than they
Than
got to
they
be,
are now.
than maybe they are now.
Yes.
That's true,
Very
that's
much
true.
so.
Now, why do you think that that was so? Things were better
I
then?
think everybody worked together, and they were for one purpose, to improve education.
Just like Carol and I,
And,
you know, who would think a black
Everybody
man and a
was
white
for it.
woman would decide to sing a duet, you know?
Mhm.
We just worked at it. We worked at it.
I think the whole thing was, why integrate the white teachers over with the black students, was to acquaint each other with the two cultures. Because we never had any black friends that were over there. We never had any connection. We never visited the black schools. There was no opportunity to.
Right.
There was no reason to. So you had Longstreet.
Segregated,
It
truly
was,
segregated.
yeah, it was segregated. There was Longstreet and the areas around there, and then out by Emerson out here. And there was no interaction. And so,
Two
the
separate
black-
school districts.
yeah, the black students needed
I'm familiar.
to know how white teachers teach and how they talk and what means what. For example, the students would come to the door of the classroom and say, "May I speak?
Yeah.
May I speak?"
Or he meddling me.
And that meant they wanted to talk to somebody in your classroom. Whether they had permission from a teacher to come to your room or not, they would just get out to go to the bathroom or something and say they wanted to go talk to somebody or give them an idea or something, and may I speak? And so that was something we had to work with, that you have to have a permission from a teacher to come.
Yeah.
May I speak? And just the pops, we called them cokes, Coca-Colas.
Yeah.
They called them pops. And they would have times when they would play records and dance. Do you remember a sock hop
Sock hops,
during
yeah.
school to have as a fundraiser to raise money for some project? And they were, the club sponsored, but they would have them in the middle of the day. And the kids would just all go if they had money to go pay for the dancing.
Yeah.
And that was something new and
Right.
something,
Definitely.
okay, we're not gonna be able to do that next year, those kinds of things. So it's different things.
Yeah.
I think I
It
had,
kind of eased us into it,
Yeah.
and that they just had to get used to, both ways, had to get used to one person instead of, I gotta get used to my teacher and my fellow student. Instead of,
I think
just
I was
gotta get
the
used to my teacher.
first teacher who had an integrated social at my house at Christmas time. I invited
Yeah.
our integrated faculty
Right.
to my house.
And did people come?
Yes, they all came, had a good time.
Oh, that's
Good
good.
time. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
But I remember that well, that I took that upon myself to do that.
Yeah. So now, you mentioned Fenton Peters.
Mhm.
What role did he play in this
He
process?
He was the principal at the black school. He welcomed us, he made us very comfortable. He did anything we asked,
He did.
okay? And I think Jack Nix did at the high school too. Okay, and I kinda know what happened at the high school, cause my husband taught at the high school.
Fabulous physics teacher, by the way,
Yes.
renowned.
And he didn't have to go to Henderson.
No.
So anyway.
They sent the young women.
Yeah, the young women, that's right. That's
But
right.
it was a lot of cooperation with a lot of people. And the principals, they were really good, really, really good.
Mr. Peters
Mm-hmm.
could,
Mm-hmm.
you could hear a pin drop when we met for chapel. And if two little boys way back up in the northeast corner or whatever, southeast corner, were whispering, he would call their names and down they'd come. He was a very good disciplinarian.
He later became principal at the high school after we integrated.
I had an incident in my classroom that had never happened to me before. 8th graders, 12, 13 years old. And 3 little boys came into the classroom of 30 kids. We're trying to study U.S. history. And I noticed the other students are giggling a lot. And they're looking at these 3 boys. And the 3 boys are saying things like, "Oh, my head hurts," and different things like that. And just being kind of silly. And everybody's laughing about it. So I start walking around by them and start smelling a little alcohol. And so I sent a student to go get Dr. Peters. Just wrote it on a note and said, "Here, go get Dr. Peters and ask him to come over." And so he came from the red brick building over to the white building. And I told him outside of the class what I suspected. And so he called the 3 boys and he took them to his office. And he shut the door of his office and left. And the heater was on in his office. It was rather a warm day. And so he went back later and he said, I didn't have to ask them if they had been drinking alcohol or anything.
Smelled it.
He opened the door and the smell would knock him down.
Had they come from the high school?
No, they were not high school kids. These were 8th graders.
Ah, but you
They
didn't
had
teach them.
found.
You didn't
I
teach
did teach them. Yeah, they were in my class.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
I don't know where they got it. He may have found out. I don't know. But there they were after lunchtime. They had come in. And so he was a very astute principal. Knew what to do, how to do it. A very fine Christian man as well.
Sang beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And on the record, we miss Dr. Peters
Yeah,
terribly.
we do. I really love that man.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I should have been on what you all are doing
Yeah.
years ago.
Yes.
Years ago.
Yeah, you
Talk
said
about
that.
Right.
You said that he was
it.
quite
I'm just
interesting.
lazy.
Yeah, and it's just tragic that he passed away.
Yeah.
It's just something, yeah.
And I guess the reason I'm doing this is I just want a history record. I'm a history teacher, and I want this recorded for history, not to win any friends or influence any people. I'm not going for any more awards or anything like that, but just that the story of Starkville and the black citizens of Starkville and the white citizens of Starkville needs to be told, because there are things we don't know
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
over there in
Yeah.
the 60s and 70s.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know
Yeah.
about what Minnie Hill, what's her name?
Yeah.
Minnie, she's married now. She's got a different name. She's on there.
We remembered
Yeah.
her. I didn't teach her,
Yeah.
but I remember Minnie. Yeah, everybody knew Minnie.
Yeah.
And we
And her
had,
last name was Hill.
yeah, at the time,
Okay.
but she's married, isn't she? She's
Yeah. It's
Max
McCartney
something
now.
or other.
Yeah.
Max something. But we don't know a lot of what went on and what they had to go through. And so it does need to be written down. And
There were some incidences where they did have to get rid of some black teachers, and we had to testify. That was hard. That was really hard. I had to testify that one of them never, when we had fire drill, she was on the 3rd floor. They just stayed. They didn't. She wouldn't get her kids out and all, and we would be all outside, and my kids would be waving at hers on the 3rd floor. They're still sitting in their room. And we were called, that made me very nervous to have to testify. I couldn't even remember where I taught, I was so nervous. But I didn't want to have to testify against anybody, but I had to. Who in the world is that? Oh, God. You coming to see about your wife?
No, I was on the garden channel, I just blew it up. You want on the door going into the sunroom? You want it?
Did you
painting
call,
her
was that you that
house.
called?
Yeah.
inside.
Just
Huh?
don't trip over the cord.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that's
I'm sorry. I hung up on him and then, I didn't recognize. He's
To
a
add to
nice guy,
this.
he's not mad like that all the time. I'm sure he's mad because I didn't answer the phone, I didn't recognize the number.
The next year, when, and this ties into what the Lowrys told you about the academy. The next year, there were teachers at the high school, white teachers, who did not want to come back and teach an integrated situation and left.
Went to the academy.
Some of them did, some of them went back to Columbus.
Oh, okay.
They were from Columbus or moved to Columbus and taught somewhere else, in an academy or somewhere else. So there were teachers, I don't know of any from Henderson, of course I wouldn't know that, but I know from the high school there were some openings because the white teachers said
They
they would
refused.
not.
Yeah. They would.
Yeah.
And that was so hard for us to understand.
Yeah.
We just couldn't understand that
Yeah.
because we didn't feel that way. They picked the right people to go. I don't know how they picked. Rosemary, I am so sorry.
That's all
I hung
right.
up on
We-
you.
We're painting.
But these three teachers taught until retirement age at the public school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I taught
Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah.
And our kids went there.
Do you, was there anything you thought in your background that made you, like, some teachers were obviously less accepting of change? You obviously were very accepting of this change.
The way I
Is
grew
there-
up.
Yeah, is
I
there
would say
anything you
that
can?
too.
That's right. The way I grew up. My parents set the example for me to be good to everybody. You know, they were not racist by any means. I had black friends from the time I could walk, and
I'd say the same thing, that my parents, my grandparents, I had a grandfather who was a farmer in the Delta, who had black women and men working for him. It just never occurred to me to treat, I think as a religious background also, it never occurred to treat anybody any different than the way you would want to be treated yourself.
it was a nerve-wracking time, though, as we have said.
Scary.
It was scary and stressful, very stressful. But we were very highly supported. As I said, did y'all ever cry? And did you ever cry?
I'm scared, yes.
I
Yes.
I will say this though, I do know how it is to be, refuse things because of, it happened to me because of religion. Okay, went to out of state, I went to a job interview, teaching, and New Hope. I was interviewing with New Hope because it's an area school. And we got down so far, and he asked my religion. I said Catholic. He said, we're through. So I do know what it feels like.
We didn't do you that way though.
No. Nope, y'all hired me.
I'm gonna need to go. If you have one more question.
Well, I was just gonna ask you before you leave about Starkville itself. So, what was, Starkville did take a long time to integrate, but then on some levels it went kind of smoothly, at least on some levels. Why did it take so long to integrate? It's kind of like what we were talking about informally before we got started. Do you have any sense of why it took court orders and, you know, the issue had to be forced?
People don't like change. No matter who you are, where you live. They don't
And there
like
are a
change.
lot of,
And
I don't know what to call them, all the people like the ones that set up the academy. You know, we just didn't realize that we were among, these were our friends, and that we were among people who were like that. And looked down on us. This became a social thing. The academy people were the elite, you know. So that surprised me too.
I compare us to Tupelo, and Tupelo had the Reeds with strong, Jack Reed with strong leadership, and his sons even today. And I think we didn't have the strong town leadership to say, this will